It is a quiet night, you are watching TV, but all of a sudden someone is coming for you. This is Diana Griezmann. She was born on March 21, 1936. She was the eldest in the family. She had a younger sister called Rita. The youngest was the baby sister Cheryl. They lived in Bonneville for a long time, then they decided to move to Missouri, specifically to Columbia. They owned a cafe in the same city, and their house was above this cafe, where they lived. All their neighbors agreed that the Griezmanns were nice and peaceful. According to the mom, Diana was special. She was nice and loved. Also, she was a very smart girl. Diana was social. She had multiple friends. Everyone loved her. Diana's parents taught her how to rely on herself since she was young, so when Diana turned 18 she was looking for a job. She started working as a babysitter during the summer break to save some money for the school. After working for a while in the neighborhood and around, everyone liked her because she was patient with the kids. One day Diana received a call from a family. They offered her some cash to take care of their 3-year-old son, Jack. Diana refused because the money was not enough, but the family kept insisting on Diana to come. They even offered her more money, but Diana also refused. Then the family offered her a much bigger amount of money, so Diana couldn't say no. It was so strange because the family seemed like they wanted Diana to come to their house no matter what. The house was in a countryside very far away from Columbia, and in a very isolated area. Diana arrived to the house at 7 p.m. The mom and the dad were the ones who opened the door for Diana. As soon as they opened the door, Diana was shocked. They looked very different. Even the way they act and the way they were talking to her was so strange. On the way to her room, Diana looked at the living room and she saw their relatives. They looked so scary, not so close to a human. Diana said that even the way they act was a bit childish, like if something is wrong with them. The parents started telling Diana about the house rules. They also informed her that their son is a bit noisy and that she needs to handle him. The dad brought his gun and started teaching Diana how to use it to defend herself in case they weren't home and something happened. Because, as I mentioned, the area was isolated and thus it was dangerous. The dad put the gun away and insisted on Diana not to open the door to any stranger. The parents turned off the light at the porch and left to a party. After 2 hours, it was about 1:30 a.m. The weather was so cold and snowy. Diana put Jake to bed and then went downstairs to watch TV. All of a sudden she heard someone knocking on the door. Diana was so scared to even check who's at the door, but he kept knocking on the door. Diana was so curious, so she went to see who's at the door, but once she went to check, she didn't find anyone. Diana was so scared, she ran upstairs immediately to Jake's room and locked the door. Then she started hearing sounds coming from the living room as if someone is missing in the stall. Diana heard footsteps approaching her room. At this point she picked up the phone and called 911. She told them that someone just got into the house and she's hiding with Jack in the room, but when they asked her about her address she lost the call. The parents decided to call Diana just to make sure everything is okay, but she did not pick up, so they decided to leave the party and go back home. When they arrived home, they were shocked from what they saw. All the windows were broken, the curtains were torn apart, and when they entered the house, what they saw was unbelievable. Diana was on the floor with the phone wire around her neck. She was stabbed 6 times, 2 in her neck, and 4 around her body. The living room was full of blood. They ran upstairs to check on their son, but what they saw was horrible. His head was cut off his body, all his body parts were cut and thrown around the room. After they called the police, the detectives came to the house and they discovered something really sad. After the killer assaulted Diana, he stabbed her several times, but she didn't die immediately. The blood marks of her hands that were on the walls indicates that she was trying to run away from him. The police used police dogs to trace the killer. They found traces next to the back window, which had been broken with a drilling tool. The dogs followed the traces for more than 6 miles, and it led them to a valley, and then the trail stopped suddenly. The detectives disagreed among themselves. Some of them said that the real killers are the parents and they used a boy to cover their crime since the boy was adopted, but others said that they could have got rid of her in another way without leaving any traces behind. So they couldn't reach any answers. The police then gathered all the black people from the area and started to question them, since they were racist at that time, but after all the investigations they couldn't reach any answers. So they called up on the parents' relatives that I mentioned earlier in the story and questioned them, but without any answers again. So who was the killer? There was a girl called Mary. She was 19 years old, and she also used to work as a babysitter. She used to work in a house very close from the house where Diana was killed. The strange is that she was killed in the same way Diana was killed. The parents got into the house and saw her dead with the phone wire around her neck, stabbed several times around her body. The only difference is that some of her body parts were missing. At that time a man called Floyd was arrested for murdering his wife in a very horrible way. After questioning him for 10 hours to see if he is related to Diana's murder, they couldn't find any answers. Floyd had nothing to do with Diana's murder. He was sentenced to death for murdering his wife. The news of Diana's murder spread among all the residents of the state. Fear and anger spread because the criminal was not arrested. Before Floyd's execution, he made a serious confession. He said that he killed his wife with the help of one of his closest friends. His name was Muller. When the police looked after Muller, they found that he was on the wanted list. Muller was 29 years old. He had a strong friendship with Jack's father Ed, that made the police suspect him more because he knew where the house is, and he knew everything about Ed's life. The police started questioning Ed again. He mentioned that Muller used to come to his house and they used to train on weapons. He mentioned that Muller was so playful. He tried to talk to Diana multiple times, but Diana kept pushing him away. Muller didn't surrender. He called Diana one day and asked her to come and watch over his kids. Diana refused and told him that she works for Ed's family, and that she doesn't feel comfortable next to him. Muller added that Ed is his best friend, and he would never mind if she worked for him. He told Diana that he would pay her whatever she want. But Diana also refused because she felt that something was off about him. When Ed and his wife went to the party the night Diana was killed, Muller was also invited, but he left the party early assuming that he has an important appointment. Ed was surprised because it was late, so what appointment could Muller have? Also the next day after the crime, Muller called Ed and asked him if he needs any help cleaning the mess and the blood from the house. Ed was surprised also because no one at that time knew about the crime but him and his wife, so how did Muller know? What is strange is that Ed didn't mention anything of this to the police. After the investigations, the police was able to arrest Muller. They started questioning him. Muller said, "If I wanted to kill Diana, why would I break the window to get into the house? Diana knew me. I was there every day. I would simply knock on the door and Diana would open the door for me." Some of the detectives were convinced by Muller's statement, others were not. The police took Muller to a barn. They started questioning him again. This time they used lie detector device. These devices at that time were weak, and their results were not fully taken into account. Muller was smart. He knew how to circumvent the device. They were unable to obtain any information all night. After presenting the results of the investigations to the judge, Muller was released due to lack of evidence. After Muller was released, he filed a lawsuit against the detectives demanding compensation, and he won the case. Then Muller moved to Arizona and lived there until he died in 2006 at age of 83. Diana's family never lived in peace, because they didn't find justice until today. Who do you think killed Diana? Was it Muller? The parents? Or maybe someone else? Please share in the comments below. That brings us to the end of the story today.